Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This time I'm going to be going over 5 players that I'd be looking to sell high on ahead of Week 8. Obviously, it's always tough to sell high on players. These are players that have been generally performing relatively well, and they're players that typically are valued or relatively high among the consensus here in the community. So these guys are generally tough to sell, and these are not. I said I'm telling you guys you have to just give away for free, but they are players that I think are at least overvalued relative to what you're going to get out of them the rest of the season. They're players that either have really difficult schedules coming up and reasons to be pessimistic about their production going forward. Maybe reasons why their previous production has just been a little bit overinflated relative to what we should expect. All that sort of stuff. And of course, all these trades need to be taken in context. You don't want to make sure that you're just getting rid of these players. You want to make sure that you're capitalizing on them and getting the most value you can. So we'll get into that as well. If you guys have any specific trade questions, I love seeing what you guys are cooking up. So just let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to give you guys my thoughts on that as well. And yeah, hopefully you guys find the video useful. If you're looking for players that I would be looking to trade for, that video also came out today, so just make sure you go check that video out on the channel as well. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's 5 videos every single week. If you're subscribed, you won't miss any of it, and I'll be here all year long to help you guys win your championships. So yeah, let's get into it, guys. Just trying to keep ourselves honest here. I'm going to start doing this every week when I get into these videos. I'll just highlight the guys we touched on the week before. So last week, our sell high candidates were Rico Dowdle, Kyren Williams, Jameson Williams, Devon Achane, and Travis Kelce. Kind of went 5 for 5 there, so I feel pretty good about that. Dowdle, more of like a low-end running back 2 the rest of the way. Kyren, just a tough game. You had 5 passing touchdowns. I'm not really worried about him, but just wasn't exactly the output you would have wanted, and now you've got them going into a bye. Corum got just as many touches, so it didn't feel great there. Jameson Williams goosed. Devon Achane had a tough game. The Dolphins are looking on the verge of an implosion. And then Travis Kelce, we saw Rashee Rice do exactly what we thought he would do and just sort of dominate touches. You did get a 40-yard catch out of Kelce, so kind of saved his day, but the usage was certainly concerning there. So I'm going to start things off with probably the most important one. Brian Thomas is a guy that even though you're not exactly selling high, I do think he's a guy that I would at least strongly look to move if I can. I'm really worried about it, honestly. I've got Brian Thomas in a lot of leagues, so maybe that's me overreacting because I do have him in, I think, in 3 of my 4 leagues that I care about the most. So I'm in too many leagues, but 3 of my 4 leagues have Brian Thomas that I really care about. Obviously, that has not gone well so far this season. It did feel like we were turning the corner a little bit before we got into last week, and then things really just got derailed last week against the Rams. Not exactly a matchup that would have scared you. And this Jaguars offense looked horrendous the entire game. I mean, they got a little bit going on garbage time at the end of the game, but there was no reason to be optimistic about anything that the Jaguars were doing there. The biggest thing here, too, is that Brian Thomas is just clearly playing hurt. We've gotten some rumors that maybe he's been playing through a wrist injury. It really looked like a shoulder injury based off what we were seeing. With him getting sort of checked at the line of scrimmage, just grabbing his shoulder and leaving the game early. Whatever it is, there's something just not quite right with Brian Thomas's body, and it sort of explains a lot in terms of why he's been so hesitant to catch those balls over the middle of the field. If you got a hurt shoulder, you certainly don't want to be taking a guy just sort of T-boning you at full speed there. So totally understandable there, but it's obviously not what we want to see. We're also not going to get an injury report over the next week here. The Jaguars are on bye, so we're not really going to get any more information out of Brian Thomas here. Honestly, maybe that's a good thing because if you're trying to sell him, maybe you don't want that injury report to come out that shows that maybe he's got a significant shoulder injury and is going to miss time. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about that. And then pair that with the fact that you've got Travis Hunter seemingly breaking out. I don't want to overreact to what Hunter did last week. He had 0 points at halftime. Got a lot done in garbage time, but he's looking better, and it's just reasonable to assume that Travis Hunter, as a rookie, having to play on 2 sides of the ball, would certainly just be a guy that takes a little bit of time to acclimate into performing at a high level. So there's reason to be concerned there with Brian Thomas and maybe Travis Hunter potentially just improving over the course of the rest of the year. With where he was drafted, there's at least a chance that Travis Hunter ends up being a better NFL player than Brian Thomas. I think that's tough to predict because Brian Thomas clearly already demonstrated that he's an alpha caliber wide receiver, but that's in the range of outcomes. So if that ended up happening, it would obviously be horrendous for Brian Thomas because I don't really want the wide receiver 2 for Trevor Lawrence as my wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And I don't really see things improving when I look at the schedule for the Jaguars. The thing that scares me the very most here, weeks 15 and 16, so right when your fantasy playoffs start, you get the Jets and the Broncos. That's 2 straight matchups against elite shutdown corners that travel with opposing teams number 1s, Sauce Gardner and then Patrick Surtain. Both those guys are absolutely lockdown corners, especially on the big X wide receivers that Brian Thomas is. We've seen these guys just shut down. Like Cortland Sutton got shut down by Sauce Gardner just a couple weeks ago. Pickens only had 2 catches against him. McMillan had 3 catches against him this last week. Like, you do not catch passes when these guys are shadowing you, and they're not going to shadow Travis Hunter because he's a different kind of player, operates more out of the slot. Like, Brian Thomas is going to get locked down in those 2 weeks, so I don't even know that I'm going to feel like I can start Brian Thomas in the first 2 weeks of the playoffs unless we get like a long month-long stretch going into it where Brian Thomas is dominant. But I'm not going to be excited about either one of those matchups, and it makes me feel like there's no way you're really winning the championship with Brian Thomas on your roster, just because you can play him for the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs, and if you can, there's reason to be very concerned about that. So if you don't want to sell him right now, wait for one more big game and then try and sell him. But if he has a couple bad weeks out of the bye, or if he ends up missing a lot of time, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned here. So I was spending a lot of time on Brian Thomas here because he's obviously a tough guy to evaluate right now, but I'm definitely concerned. And if people in your league are still valuing him really highly, I would definitely at least look to see what I can get for him because I am definitely concerned about what we're going to get the rest of the way. Next, we got another running back that we'll go into, and it's going to be DeAndre Swift. And look, he's playing really well. It seems like the Bears starting to do a lot more, really taking advantage of all the improvements they made on their offensive line, really focusing on the interior of their offensive line, and they're seemingly finding better ways to utilize DeAndre Swift, trying to get him in space. And I'm optimistic about what this Bears offense is going to look like the rest of the way, but there are some things that are a little bit concerning in terms of a trend standpoint. We saw Kyle Monangai see a season-high snap share in Week 7. For context, DeAndre Swift played 81% of the snaps in Week 1. He was a workhorse caliber running back there. Each of the last 2 weeks, his best 2 weeks of the season for fantasy, he played 56 and 54% of the snaps, with Monangai being right around that 40 to 45% range. So there's reason to be concerned here. We also saw Roschon Johnson get back on the field. Not great. Like, he's not going to take a lot of touches, but just one more guy to be a little bit annoying. In-game scripts where they can't lean on the run as much as they did this last week, because obviously the last 2 games they've been winning. Played New Orleans team that just couldn't really stop the run all day. You had Monangai and DeAndre Swift both play really well on the ground, and it was really just clear that the Bears wanted to lean on their running game. They did so successfully, but that's not going to be something that I think they can do down the stretch. If you look at the fantasy playoffs, the Bears have the worst schedule for running backs. They play Cleveland. We know how good that defense is. Green Bay. We know how good that defense is. And then we have San Fran. We just saw them shut down Bijan on the ground. So it's not a very good stretch there at all. DeAndre Swift feels more like a low-end running back too, and you've gotten 2 straight top 5 performances out of him. If you can capitalize on that value, like, I think people are going to be optimistic about the Bears offense going forward. He's got a little bit of extra value because he's through his bye. You can definitely sell people on that. He's useful, right? I've got him in a couple of leagues. I'm not like panic selling him here, but I'm worried about what I'm going to get out of him out of the playoffs. So if you're a team that's already set for the playoffs, if you could just move him for like a lateral kind of guy, like I would trade him for Cam Scatabo in a heartbeat. Something like that, if you can pull that kind of trade off, I think it makes a lot of sense because I am worried about what you're going to get out of Swift, at least once we get to the fantasy playoffs. Got another running back here. We're going to go into J.K. Dobbins. It's actually his second time on the list this season. And again, this is a sort of a dive into what the fantasy playoffs are going to look like. You got J.K. Dobbins with the second worst schedule for fantasy running backs here. You get Green Bay, Jacksonville, and Kansas City. 3 teams that have really done a great job of shutting down the run game so far this season. He also played less than 50% of the snaps last week. A big part of that is just he's not involved when this team needs to throw the ball. You got R.J. Harvey obviously getting involved. And then you got Tyler Bidet sort of annoyingly involved as well. This is a team that is employing 3 running backs. They're basically going 50% for Dobbins and about 25% for the other 2 guys. And the concern there is that you're not going to get catches for Dobbins unless he happens to be on the field for a pass play and catch a check down, but he's not like running routes by any means. No explosive plays with Dobbins yet either. It just doesn't seem like he has that like breakaway speed he did earlier in his career, or even early last season as the Chargers. So you're not really going to get any explosives. So really, the only way it feels like Dobbins can give you a good fantasy game is if he gets 20 carries and scores a touchdown, right? Because you need him to he's going to get 4 yards per carry. So you need 20 carries for 80 yards, get a touchdown, bang, there's your 14 points. But maybe you get 1 catch for 5 yards in there. It's just like there's no real ceiling with J.K. Dobbins, and the floor is really low. Like, there are a lot of touchdown-dependent running back 2s that you can just find. Like, pick up Bam Knight. He's a touchdown-dependent running back 2. He's going to get 15 to 17 touches. If he falls in the end zone, you're happy. If he doesn't, you're not. And, like, that's a waiver caliber guy that's really similar to what Dobbins is offering you. Of course, Dobbins is better than Bam Knight, but the fact of the matter is, like, there's not a huge difference. Typically, when you've got such a touchdown-dependent, like, low-end running back 2, You can play those guys, but they have such a low floor that it can really set you up for failure. And I think if you can capitalize on Dobbins, like if you can get real value for him, and then just have to just find a guy that you can fill in your lineup every single week, that's not the end of the world. I would want Dobbins to be like my running back 4. It's just a guy that I can play on a bye week, and if you're using him every single week, I just don't feel great about that. So if you can move off him and get a more reliable asset the rest of the way, I think that makes a lot of sense. Next, we've got a receiver to talk about. It's going to be Chris Olave. Been a big fan of Olave's for a long time. It was great to see him finally come out and have a fantastic game this week, but it's just not something that's really going to be sustainable with Olave here. The Saints have the second worst strength of schedule for wide receivers the entire rest of the season. That is far from exciting. Obviously, you want to see things loosen up for him because you're going to need pop plus matchups here for Olave to really pop off and be reliable every single week. He scored twice this last week as well. For context, Chris Olave caught 1 receiving touchdown all of last season. Granted, he didn't play every single game. And he had 1 receiving touchdown through the first 6 weeks of the year before he caught 2 this week. So not exactly something I'm going to expect to repeat itself. He probably ends up with like 2 to 3 more receiving touchdowns over the course of the entire season. Great to see him do it twice, but it's just not necessarily a big part of his game. He's more of a guy that's just a possession receiver, not a very huge player, right? He's not a guy that they look to as a red zone threat, and even those deep plays tend to go to Shaheed a little bit more than Olave. So I'm not really excited about that. And then the other thing that's sort of just floating out there as a possibility is, and you're not even really hearing a whole lot of noise about this, so I don't want to be like overreacting to it or like over analyzing the situation here, but they drafted Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round. The Saints are clearly not going to win a lot of games this season. They're playing for next year, and they're going to be in a situation where they probably have a top 5 pick that they're spending on a quarterback. It seems, I guess I'll call it unlikely for the Saints to go into the end of this season having not played Tyler Shuck for a single snap. Like, Spencer Rattler's been respectable, and that's great. He's been enough to like support some fantasy relevance out of Chris Olave, and he's clearly better than Tyler Shuck because they wouldn't have just started him to start the year. And the concern is that if you see Tyler Shuck come out because they just want to see him because they spent a 2nd round pick on him, they're going to want to see what they have before they completely move off of him. Because if they draft a top 5 quarterback, they're probably cutting Shuck next year to let Rattler stay here as the backup. It makes sense for them to see what Shuck can do, and if you end up getting like a 5 or 6 week stretch at the end of the year where you're playing Tyler Shuck, I don't think Chris Olave is going to be a guy that I feel great about at all. We at least have some sort of a floor here with Rattler, so that concerns me for sure. I think if you could get like a low-end wide receiver 2 for Olave, I would consider doing that because he's been really good so far. Definitely hyper-targeted. They need to use him a ton because he's like the best player they have on their entire team, but there's reasons to be concerned here. The schedule, potential quarterback change, touchdown variance. I'm just not super optimistic here as much as I like the player. I think if you could move off of him, just find someone with a better situation, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we've got one quarterback to get into on this list, and it's going to be Bo Nix. He's coming off of a quarterback 1 overall performance in Week 7, about the fakest quarterback 1 overall performance you can have. He had 4 fantasy points going into the 4th quarter, finished with like 43, depending upon which scoring format you're in. So obviously not something that's going to be very repeatable here. You had the Giants implode about as much as you could, and on top of that, you're going to see a lot of really fluffy projections for Bo Nix this week. Have a Week 8 matchup against Dallas. That is actually fantastic if you have Bo Nix and you want to play him this week. Totally fine with that, but beyond that, Denver has the 2nd worst schedule for opposing quarterbacks the entire rest of the season after this week. And it's not like Denver's looked good on offense this season to begin with. They've really struggled. They couldn't score against the Jets in London 2 weeks ago. Overall, I don't think anybody would say they've watched the Broncos this season and would say that they've had a good offense by any means. The schedule gets tough. They're going to play a lot of really quality opposing defenses, and when you pair that with an offense that's not really pushing the ball downfield very effectively, just watching Bo Nix play, it's hard. Like, he cannot hit a deep throw to save his life right now. His only fantasy value is coming from scrambling and then yards after the catch to like Marvin Mims, and then the occasional like 15-yard chunk play to Sutton. Like, it's just not fun to watch the Broncos play offense right now, and I think there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about what they're going to do the rest of the season. I get it, they got Sean Payton. He's a great offensive mind. There's reasons to maybe be optimistic about them figuring things out, but I don't necessarily think they have the personnel to go out there and overcome really tough matchups. I think there's reason to be concerned here, and if Bo Nix especially comes up with another like top 5 performance this week, which could certainly happen against the Dallas defense, he would just be a screaming sell high for me because I don't think after this week he's going to be a guy that you want to play very often. And with the draft pedigree, he was a guy that people drafted to be a quarterback 1 this season. Pair that with a really great performance last week. If he can compile that into another good one this week, people that are quarterback needy, they're going to want him. So definitely a guy I think that should be on the trade block for you guys because I don't think he's a guy you want to play the rest of the year. So that'll do it for the players I'd be looking to sell high on this week. Up next, we're going to get into start and sits. So I will go over every single game this week, help you guys make some starts and sit decisions. We've obviously got a really tough week here, 6 teams on bye. It's going to be tough to make sure we can fill our lineups and get some good players. We'll go even a little bit deeper. I'll talk about every single player and every single matchup that could be potentially fantasy relevant and do what I can to give you guys the most information possible and get you guys all set to hopefully win some games this week. So I appreciate you guys. Again, any specific questions, trade questions, start sit questions already, just let me know in the comments below. I love interacting with you guys there. And then if you haven't already, give the video a thumbs up. It's the best way you can support me here. So appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you guys with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.